欢迎大家来到2022台北电影节国际新导演竞赛的线上影人座谈。我是今天的主持人洪建伦。因为新冠肺炎的影响我们在今年还是很可惜无法邀请这些入选影片的剧组亲自来到我们的影展现场，跟大家分享他们的创作心路。但是我们还是希望呢，能够透过这个线上 Q&A 的模式，让这些精彩作品的创作者还是有机会跟各位喜欢他的电影的观众来分享他们作品背后的故事。那今天这次来到我们线上访谈的是爱尔兰电影《夏日悄悄话》的 Quiet Girl 的导演科姆巴瑞德。
Hello everyone online. Welcome to the 2022 International New Talent Competition in Taipei Film Festival, the Q&A session. And this year, unfortunately, with the pandemic, the COVID, it's still a huge pity for us not be able to invite those amazing directors and filmmakers here in Taipei with us. But we initiated this online Q&A, and we hope that all our audiences will be better interact. We can still interact with the filmmaker and director. So today we are very honored to have the director of the film The Quiet Girl on Colm Queen, the director Colm BAIRÉAD to be here with us.
我们先请导演跟大家打声招呼。那我想也先用爱尔兰的方言跟导演打声招呼。Diolch, Colm.
Diolch, very impressive use of the Irish language. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Taipei Film Festival. It's a real honor for our film to be playing at the festival. It's a pity, as you say, that we can't be there in person. But obviously, with the way the situation with COVID at the moment, it's not possible. But it's still wonderful that our film is part of the festival and that the festival is continuing despite the current challenges.
那大家好，也谢谢大家的这台北电影节的邀请。那如同刚刚所说的，我也是相当的觉得感到这个非常荣幸能够在今年的我的电影可以在台北电影节放映。那也非常可惜这个疫情的关系让我们没有办法亲临现场跟大家互动。但是呢，透过这个线上的 Q&A， 我们还是可以做一些交流这样子。
那我们就开始今天的访谈那首先我还是想要请导演谈谈您的电影的创作的开始。毕竟看过这部电影的人都知道夏日悄悄话是一个非常非常动人心弦，然后看完心里会非常暖和的一部电影。那其实它是改编自一部小说。那导演，我看到资料上您好像是在2018年的时候看到这部小说The Foster，然后其实我觉得很快的就在2020年的柏林影展这部电影就首映了。其实对一部改编小说来讲，我觉得那个速度是相当快的。我也相信这个小说，但我相信您在看到它的时候可能也是有一个非常强的动力，让你用一个非常快的速度就把它给改编成电影了。那可不可以请您跟我们谈谈，就是当初您看到这本小说的时候它给您什么样子深刻的印象
Okay, so first my question would be, as usual, the genesis of the film. The film, I believe, if anyone watched this film, will feel that this film is quite moving and touching, and it's quite a warm film. And then, as I go through the documents, I actually learned that the film was adapted from a novella named Foster by Claire KEEGAN, and it says that you read the novella in 2018. And then I believe the film was not shortly after the film was premiered at the Berlinale. So I imagine that you must have this obsession or this strong sentiment that you make the film so quickly. So my question would be the genesis of the film and also your first encounter with this novella, and why would you like to make this film?
Yeah, so as you say, I first read Foster in 2018, and it just had a very profound effect on me. I essentially fell in love with the work. not only the storyline and the characters, which is so moving, as I hope that the film is as well, but also the style of writing that Claire KEEGAN brings to that work is really extraordinary. It's a work that's written in the present tense, and it's very much a first person narrative. You're seeing the entire story through the eyes of this young girl, and that just felt immediately appealing to me as a filmmaker, because this is my first feature film, but all of my short films prior to this had all centered on young protagonists. So I have a particular affection for stories that are centered around young protagonists. And I quite enjoyed the Foster and this film it's a film about it's a film about many things, but it's in terms of its point of view, it's a film that's presenting a point of view that doesn't fully understand the adult world yet. And that to me felt like a really intriguing prospect in terms of, well, how do you transpose that very particular point of view to the language of film? And how do you honor that point of view that Claire KEEGAN has established so beautifully in her writing? How do you do that in the language of film? And I love point of view in film. I love the whole question of point of view, and so that was immediately intriguing to me. Those two things, like the formal aspects of the original literary source material in terms of point of view and sort of placing the reader in a very particular place, and then obviously the wonderful emotional dynamic of the story, and the emotional restraint of the piece. All of those things just felt very close to my own sensibility in terms of what I would typically be interested in terms of a style of filmmaking or a style of screenwriting. So yeah, it was a combination of those two things.
OK， 如同您刚刚说到的哦，第一次我看到这本小说的确在2018年哦。那我在看到这个小说的时候，其实这个小说对我来讲有非常深刻的一个影响，这样子哦。我一看完之后，我就非常的爱上这个作品哦。它里面的这个故事线，还有里面的角色呢，都非常非常的感人。那除此之外，我也非常喜欢这个作者这个 Claire KEEGAN 他的写作的这个形式跟风格，我觉得相当的出色，这样子哦。那这本书呢，我跟大家介绍一下，基本上它的这个都是用现在式来写的，然后都是用第一人称的这个观点来诉说。那这个第一人称当然就是这个年轻女主角这个小女孩的透过她的眼睛来看这个一切的事情的发生，这样子。那所以我刚看这个小说，我就觉得说，哇，这个是非常的精彩出色，而且以我这个电影工作者的角度，就觉得非常的好。那这部片当然是我的第一部的长片，但是事实上我在之前所拍摄的其他短片，我其实他们的主角大部分我都是聚焦在这个年轻的人身上，这样子。所以我本来就有一个这样的对他们比较有关注的一个过去，这样子。那我实际上是真的很喜欢这个小说跟电影。那我觉得这个里面的第一人称这个观点呢，其实是还蛮非常有趣的，因为这些小孩他们其实是还不太了解成人世界的这种观点，他们看到了，但是却没有办法完全理解。那我觉得这个是一个很有趣的一个点。那我就在想说，怎么样把它转换用电影的语言把它说出来，这样子，而且要忠于这个观点的呈现。那这个观点也是当初 Claire 在写这个小说的时候发挥的非常好的一个地方，这样子。那我个人也是非常的喜欢跟以一个电影工作者去讨论这样的观点，所以对我来讲总括来说有2个地方是我觉得很吸引我的地方。第一个就是刚刚讲是这个形式的部分，就是说以第一人称的观点跟这样的观点对于在读者身上的效应。那第2个地方我觉得我也很想要讨论，就是说这个故事里面它对我来讲很有兴趣的是说，这个故事里面它里面非常强烈的情绪的张力跟情绪的波动，这样子。我觉得这个电影里面的情感跟力量呢，是跟我本身是我能够感到非常有共鸣的。那因此这2个大的理由让我对这个作品的改编有兴趣。
那我也很想很好奇哦，导演您刚刚提到这个在观点上的转换， 还有他这个不论是小说或是在您电影里面都可以感觉到那个非常细微的这些情感的表达。在我很好奇，就是在这样的改编的过程之中，对你来讲最大的挑战可能是什么？那或者是说最让你印象深刻的地方是什么？
Okay, so you just mentioned about how you have to transpose this distinctive first-person point of view into the language of film, and then we do feel that those emotions in the film present were nuanced or very detailed in such a delicate mood. And then, so my question would be: so throughout all this adaptation, have you have any challenges or what's your biggest challenges? And if not, what are the most impressive incidents happened throughout this adaptation?
Well, I suppose the first challenge was quite apparent early on, because if you read Foster, it's very short. It's essentially a long short story. It's the author doesn't even like to call it a novella. And you would read it in maybe 30 minutes. You know, it's a very short piece. So I knew from the beginning that it would require a slightly bigger canvas, and that the storyline would have to be expanded slightly to suit the sort of 3-act structure of a feature film. So I essentially had to create a new first act for the film. So the opening kind of 15 minutes of the film doesn't exist in the literary source material. So that was the kind of primary immediate challenge in terms of from book to film. But having said that, there were the way the original is written, the young girl, she has little moments where she mentions very, very small incidents from her past. It might just be a sentence here or there that references something from her home life, you know, or something to do with her father or her mother. So I would kind of seize upon any of those small, they were like little breadcrumbs, you know, in the original that I would pick up, and then I would expand upon those and create a scene or a sequence that could work for the opening act in terms of giving us a window into this young girl's home life, which I felt was quite important in order to show the contrast that exists between the type of parenting that she's subjected to within her biological family, and then this new atmosphere that she encounters when she comes to the Kinsela's home. So that was the sort of immediate challenge. And then the other challenge, I suppose, was finding that specific visual language that I referenced previously, and always being mindful of being true to that and allowing the story to sort of pass through this character. But then also, you know, as the film progresses, it allows itself a little bit more room, I think, in that regard, in terms of its formal aesthetic quality, in that it feels more focused on the young girl in the beginning, and then when we come to the Kinsela's house, it actually becomes more important that even though the story is still being told through her, that this sense of space, that's allowed to breathe, you know. There's a great line in the original where Claire KEEGAN describes the Kinsella household. The young girl describes it as this place. This is a place where there is space and time to think. So it was important to us that sense of space would suddenly present itself for this character, and that the world would feel bigger, you know, even though the framing remains the same, and we shot it at a very constrained aspect ratio, 1:37:1 Academy ratio, which is again tied to the question of point of view and the notion that this is a young person whose horizons haven't quite expanded yet, you know, and who doesn't understand everything about the world. That there are things just outside the frame that are, in a sense, invisible to her. That we still maintain that frame, but that the film would feel bigger, and that there would be more of a sense of space and a possibility when she comes to the Kinsella household. So yeah, they were the two sort of primary challenges, apart from obviously the casting, which we'll probably talk about in a little while. But yeah, the main challenge from a script writing point of view was that knowing that we had to expand what was there, and then the challenge of really finding the correct language for the film's aesthetic.
好，那对我来讲呢，的确这个片子有2大部分的挑战。第一个部分的挑战是比较明显的，就是说当我们要改编小说就会遇到的问题，是因为原著小说其实是长度非常的不长，蛮短的，你可以说它是一个比较长的短篇小说这样子它并不是一本小说这样子就是通常你花很快的时间就可以把它读完这样子。那所以说其实如果要把它拍成剧情长片的话，我们需要一个比较大的篇幅如果我们讲说剧情长片就是有像是3幕剧的这种结构的话，那事实上呢，我在这个电影的第1幕的这个部分也就是说这个电影的前15分钟其实都是小说里没有写到的，这都是我们在电影之中创作出来的。那所以最主要直接的这个挑战就是说怎么样去填补这个创造出这些部分这样子那不过这个部分其实还是从这个小说里来，这个小说里呢这个作家写作的方式，事实上这个女生的第一人称的观点是有在不同的地方稍微1-2句描述了一下她的这个可能有讲到父亲，讲到她的母亲，有稍微描述一下。那我就像是好像捡面包屑的感觉，反正我就是有点抽丝剥茧的感觉，把这些小小的线索呢，我去做一些发挥去想象出一场一场的场景这样子。那我觉得这个部分也是还蛮重要的，就是我刚刚讲的，我创造出来这个前面这15分钟的第一部分，是因为它可以很好的呈现出这个小女孩她的原生家庭，然后跟她后来到了这个收养家庭里，我觉得可以做一个很好的一个对比，所以我觉得这个前面这个部分也是蛮重要的。好，那我们第2个部分呢，我觉得一个挑战就是说怎么样找到这个一个正确的视觉语言来去符合这个小说里的这个美学这样子那我觉得这个里面呢这个电影一开始当然就是围绕在小女孩身上，但是你会发现当她到了这个收养家庭的这个他们的一个算是农庄这里呢，你会发现其实呢这个电影的这个视角就慢慢的到了这个像是这个场域的地方所以说这个地方其实我觉得它的这个空间感变得很重要。原始的小说其实也透过这个小女孩描述了很多关于这个场景就是这个家的这个空间感这样子。那在这个地方呢，它好像有了更多的空间跟时间来去思索一些事情这样子那所以说这个整个空间感对我们来讲，如何把它透过影像来创造出来是蛮重要的。那我想特别提一下，我们这部电影的这个比例其实蛮特别的。我们这部电影的比例并不是这种比较一般电影说很就是2.35:1的感觉，我们这部电影是一个1.37:1的这个比例，也就是说稍微是比较方一点的。那我们会做这样的选择，也是符合我们刚刚讲的跟第一人称的这个观点有关。因为我们刚刚提到说，这个小女孩她的这个观点其实是她还是一个小孩，但还没有像大人一样还不了解这些事情，还没有开眼界的感觉。那所以有些东西在她所看到之外的东西他也并不是很能够了解。那我们觉得透过用了这个尺寸跟这个比例，可以有我刚刚提到更多的空间感好像感觉比较开阔比较高一点点这种感觉这样子。对，所以呢除了说在选角上的困难我相信等一下我们会讲到选角。那刚刚我现在讲的这2个问题呢，就是我遇到比较大的挑战。一个就是说这个小说改编我需要填补一些空白，另外一个就是说我在这个视觉上如何去找到正确的视觉去符合这个电影的美学。
是，的确像导演刚刚提到的，就是我们接下来会谈到选角，因为我相信这部电影的不论到哪里去放映完之后，大家一定都很想再多了解，就是这个女主角的小演员 Catherine Clinch 那请导演可以谈谈看，就是当初您是怎么样子找到这个小演员的？那我们也很好奇，所以他的个性其实跟这个角色很接近吗？还是他私底下他是一个什么样子的人？
Okay, so let's just talk about the casting. So I believe the audiences, whenever watch the film, will be deeply impressed by the lead actress, Catherine Clinch. Her performances in the film is quite remarkable. So I was wondering, how did you meet or how did you cast her in this film? What's your encounter like? And then I'm also curious about her in the real life. Is she a timid, a sensitive, quiet girl, and like in person in real life?
So to answer the first part of the question, I suppose it took us about 7 months to find Catherine. So we started, I suppose, just to explain a little bit about the sort of linguistic makeup of Ireland. In Ireland, the official language of Ireland is the Irish language, which is the language that you hear predominantly in the film. However, it's actually a minority language in Ireland. Like, most Irish people can't really speak the language. It's only spoken as a sort of an everyday working language in very small pockets around the country, generally rural areas. But then you do have, in the last few decades, there has been a movement to create a sort of a network of primary schools where all the subjects are taught entirely through Irish. So I would have gone to one of those schools. I would have done all of my schooling through the Irish language and so forth. So so we were, when you're trying to cast, a 9-year-old girl, 9-10 years of age, you're not necessarily going to an actor's agent, because these types of people are usually they're unknown. They're people that you have to go out and you have to find. So so we were able to use that network of those Irish language schools as a sort of a first port of call, of as a place to try and find this young person. So that's what we did. I mean, we did hold open auditions, like in-person auditions in areas of the country down south, largely, because the film is set in the south of Ireland, or down the bottom of Ireland. So we had in-person auditions there we saw hundreds of young people. And then COVID came along, unfortunately, and we had to move then to receiving all of our auditions as self-tapes. So people would record, or their parents would record them on a phone and send us in the tapes. And it was one of those tapes that came in about 7 months into the process, since we started casting and trying to find the character of Coet, that we saw this tape from Catherine Clinch. And it was the producer of the film, Cleona, who's actually my wife. She rang me and she said, "Colm, you need to see this tape. This girl is incredible." And when I saw it, I just knew immediately that we had found our Coet. She had this extraordinary ability to inhabit the character, and just seemed to have an intuitive understanding of who this young person was, this young character, and how she had learned to push all of her emotions inwards, and that she had sort of developed this shell around herself, and was so guarded. And it was just a beautiful thing to see that Catherine understood all of that, and understood that there was no need to over emote, and almost an understanding on her part that the camera, the essence of great screen acting is often withholding from the camera, and trusting in the fact that the camera is almost a kind of an X-ray machine that can see into the character, as distinct from, say, theatrical acting, like acting for the stage, where that style of acting is based on a kind of a projection because you have to reach the person at the back of the room. With cinema, it's almost the inverse of that. And you have to, it's about withholding, and it's about letting the camera get close and letting the audience through the camera read the character. And Catherine just seemed to have an innate understanding of that. And, you know, she's just an extraordinary young person. She's incredibly emotionally intelligent and, you know, had never acted in front of a camera before, and yet took to the process and understood the sort of the technical requirements of shooting a film so naturally. It was extraordinary. It felt like she had been doing it, you know, for many years prior to that, and yet it was her very first time. So it was really special, you know, and her performance became, it sort of set the tone for the whole film, you know. She became a sort of the guiding light of the film that we were following, and in a strange sense, almost showed us the film that we were making, you know.
是不一样的。戏剧的演出，因为在舞台，它是有一种投射的感觉。演员其实需要把他的演出传递到最后一排的人，让他们都能够演得出来，所以他们常常要演的是比较放的。但是我觉得在电影里的演出其实是比较需要收的，而让这个摄影机来去接近你。我觉得这两个的表演其实是不一样的。但是我觉得很惊讶是 Catherine 似乎了解这件事情哦，他在这个拍摄的过程中，他非常的杰出，他在这个情绪上的掌控都非常的好。那必须要提的是，他其实并没有在任何在镜头前演出的经验，这样子，他居然能够了解说这样的演出所需要的这个技术上的细节，这样子，而且演得非常的自然，好像是一个老手一样。但是我再次强调，他是第一次在电影前面做演出，所以我觉得整个经验是非常的特别神奇的这样子哦。那我也要必须强调说，他的演出呢，反而他的演出也为我们这部电影呢的这个基调，这个情绪的基调做了一个很好的设定，这样子，他的演出几乎就像是他这么一演，我们剩下的东西呢就去跟随他的感觉，他好像是一个灯塔的感觉，那我们就跟随他，剩下部分就一切的到位这样子。
And just to answer, I never answered your question about Catherine, whether she's quite like the character, and I think she actually is. She is a rather quiet individual in real life. She's I would describe her as highly observant. You know, she's very, very watchful, and you know, I think that's as I was saying before. There's an emotional intelligence there that she certainly possesses, and that was, you know, she always said that she felt very close to the character, that she could see aspects of herself in the role, and she, you know, she had great empathy for the character, which of course is, you know, one of the requirements for any actor in terms of a character that they're trying to inhabit. So yeah, she always said that.
OK， 我刚刚忘记回答说，就是他本人哦，所以我这边回答一下，他本人事实上也是有一些这样子独立的感觉哦。那我觉得，如果要我来描述他的话，我觉得他的一个很大的特色就是，我觉得他的观察力很敏锐，观察力很强这样子哦。那就像我刚刚讲，他其实这个情绪商数哈，就是 EQ 也很高这样子哦。那我觉得说他自己本人也有说，他其实觉得说，他觉得他非常能够认同、感同身受这个就是这个女主角这个 coach 这个角色这样子哦。那他觉得他自己有些部分跟他是有一点像这样子，那他也觉得这个角色跟他很贴近。那当然，我觉得任何的演员呢，也必须要对他们的这个角色有部分的感同身受这样子。
好，非常感谢导演非常详细的回答。不过因为时间的关系，我想我还是想再趁最后一点时间问导演一个我觉得也是很重要的问题，就是导演刚刚也提到了这个语言上面的这件事情，那包括在The Quiet Girls 里面，他们角色们使用的也都是爱尔兰的盖尔语。 我也很好奇，这个盖尔语他在原著小说里面也有提到说这些角色他们本来就是使用这样的语言吗？那还是说这个故事它设定在1981年这个年份，跟这个语言的使用也有什么样子特别的关系？
Okay, so we still have a little some time. So since you brought out the question about the language, so like the audiences, if you saw the film, you know the film is primarily in Irish, Gaelic, and then I was wondering that if the original story are written in Irish as well. Also, the film is set in the 1981 or in the 80s. So does the language or the time play a big part of this setting?
So the two things are kind of separate. First of all, to explain the original, like Claire Keegan's Foster is an English language work. Like there's no Irish in that. But this film was made as part of a particular scheme that we have in Ireland to promote Irish language feature films. And because all of my previous work in short drama had been through the Irish language, I was very kind of determined to try and get funding for one of these feature films. So when I first read Foster, I was already thinking to myself, oh, is it possible to sort of move the action of this story organically into a setting where the Irish language makes sense, and that that an Irish audience would recognize that this is a logical use of the language, because as I said, the language isn't spoken in most parts of the country. So that was the main reason that it's in the Irish language, is because I wanted to make an Irish language feature film, and the story lent itself to being easily sort of transplanted to that setting. And I suppose that's also a reflection of my own upbringing. Like I was raised bilingually, so like my father has never spoken English to me. My father has only ever spoken Irish to me, whereas my mother spoke English always when we were growing up. And even though we grew up in Dublin, in the capital city of Ireland, which isn't an Irish-speaking area at all, so we were a slightly unusual family. People would kind of look at us slightly strangely and wonder why we were speaking this language. So it was that. It's partly a reflection of my own experience, particularly the fact that there's in this film that one of the parents is an English speaker, whereas the other parent is an Irish speaker. So that was something that felt very, that was part of my own lived experience. And it was also born of a desire to somehow reflect the fact that these two languages coexist in Ireland, that it's not, I didn't want to film entirely in the Irish language, because that to me wouldn't have felt like a reflection of the country as I know it in terms of its language. Now, obviously there are situations where you could situate a story in an Irish language community and it would make total sense that it's entirely in Irish, but I do like to include English in any Irish language films that I make, if it makes sense, because I think Irish audiences can identify with that a little bit better. And then in terms of the year in which it's set, so it's set in 1981, and the original source material was also set in that year. And I suppose the reason that it's set in that time period is because, and not set today, is because this practice of sending off a child from a family to live with other relatives, or kind of shipping these kids away out of the house, that was a reality at that time that no longer exists now, really. And it was, I suppose, a reflection of a way in which Irish society thought less of children, in a sense, or didn't recognize the needs of children to the same extent that we hopefully do now. In Ireland, we have we have a kind of a mixed history in terms of how well we've treated children here since the foundation of our republic. So it's, you know, it's situated, the story is situated in a time when society hadn't sort of woken up to the fact that children needed to be protected a little bit more. So I suppose that's the primary reason that it's set in that period, you know, that it's reflecting a social reality that belonged to the art of that time, and that wouldn't really make sense if you were to base the story today. It would feel slightly more unusual and wouldn't be speaking to a kind of a social reality in the same way that it does set in Ireland's past.
好，那这个问题我先回复一下，就是这个原著的小说其实是以英文写成的那里面并没有爱尔兰语的部分这样子。那当初其实呢，我们其实是申请了这个爱尔兰的当地的这个算是补助这样子那爱尔兰当地有一个补助是是他们是支持就是任何以爱尔兰语拍摄的电影这样子希望能够对于这个爱尔兰这个语言呢能有帮助这样子。那其实我之前做其他短片也大部分就是以爱尔兰语为主这样子所以我当初我其实是一直很下定决心的，我要去申请就是这个爱尔兰语的这个片子的补助这样子那所以当我一看到这个小说，我的第一个想法就是说，那我有没有可能用爱尔兰语来呈现这个故事这样子或是说用爱尔兰语呢，到底是说得通说不通的这样子，那观众能不能够理解这样子的决定这样子。那总之来讲呢，一个部分就是其实是我的一个意志这样子我一直都蛮希望或是蛮坚持或是蛮决定就是要拍这个爱尔兰语的影片这样子，我有这样的使命这样子。那另一个部分其实也是反映我自己的成长历程事实上我爸爸呢，他在家里他都只说爱尔兰语，他是不说英文的这样子，但是我妈妈是说英文的，所以说我从小其实生长在首都都柏林，那都柏林这个首都并不太会说爱尔兰语这样子那所以我们在路上讲起爱尔兰语的时候，别人都会投射这种一些比较奇异的眼光，我觉得我们在说什么这样子那我有这样的这个成长的经验，所以说其实也某一个程度想要反映的我这个成长的经验跟影响，所以你也看出来在片里这个设定爸爸在里面几乎是讲英文的这样子那妈妈是讲爱尔兰语这样子这个也是有贴近我的这个经验这样子。那但我也其实一直都想要去呈现这个爱尔兰语跟英语两个共存的这个现实因为其实我也没有想要让这个电影是完全是全爱尔兰语演出这样子因为我觉得这样好像跟也没有办法很忠实的反映现实。当然你要说其实要整个片影全部都用爱尔兰语来演绎，其实也是可以的，但是我的个人的喜好，我还是想要在我的影片里加入一些英语的元素这样子因为我觉得它刚刚讲比较能够反映现实，我也觉得爱尔兰的观众更能够感同身受，因为这是他们遇到的这个现状这样子。那至于讲到片子里的时间的设定那是我们的电影跟小说都同样是设定在1981年这样子那其实理由还蛮简单的，就是说在电影里发生的这个剧情，就是说当你稍微有点无能为力的时候，把自己的小孩送出去给其他人收养，这样的事情的发生在当年是有这样子的现实的，是蛮常发生的。那如果你把它送在现在，其实是没有这样的事情的。所以某个程度上，其实我们是想要反映当时爱尔兰的社会有这样的现状那我们也可以说，当时爱尔兰的社会其实是对于儿童的思考，对于儿童其实是不是那么关注儿童的，不是那么关怀儿童的，应该这么说，或是说儿童的需求并不是那么被重视到这样子那我希望我们现在是在这个状况上是有比较好的。那爱尔兰共和国在这个历史过程中，事实上对于怎么样对待小孩，事实上是在这个历史上其实是有一些做法有时候并不是非常的理想这样子是有时候时好时坏的感觉。所以说我想这个故事呢设定在这个时代，主要的原因呢就是我刚刚讲的要来反映社会的现实这样。如果把它放到现代，其实会对观众来讲会有点奇怪，无法理解这样子。
感谢导演的回答。那也因为时间的关系，我们的这一次的线上 QA 其实也差不多该告一段落了。那还是非常感谢导演科姆巴瑞德这次为我们带来这么精彩的一部非常动人的作品。那也很希望导演未来也可以继续为我们带来更多更好看的爱尔兰的故事。那也提醒大家，就是所有我们今年的国际新导演竞赛的影人线上访谈呢，都会在国际新导演竞赛入选的作品的首场放映之后，然后在我们台北电影节的 YouTube 官方频道上面发布。那也欢迎大家如果你喜欢这些电影，然后在看了这些电影之后，看了这些作品之后，也欢迎来到我们的 YouTube 频道上面来收看我们所为大家带来的影人线上访谈。那我们谢谢导演Colm. Thank you very much for your sharing about the story behind the Quiet Girl. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
好的，谢谢大家。那也这是对我来讲是一个荣幸，这样子。
好的，好，谢谢，拜拜。
Thank you.